thank you so much for the chance to be here and to welcome this incredible group of students representing La Casa Cultural. This event is kind of the last in a series we planned this fall in honoring Latina Heritage Month here at the Beinecke and finding groups of students working across campus in a variety of different communities, classes, academic contexts, social and kind of cultural and activist contexts here that are able to tell some of the stories using the collections in the Beinecke and in other parts of our many wonderful special collections repositories here on campus. So the idea has been to connect groups here on campus who want to tell the kinds of stories that can highlight Latina voices and experiences, not only on our campus, but throughout New Haven, highlight the connections that have existed between our campus community and our neighbors over time in many different contexts. And so we are very grateful to have here sharing with us today the Historical Preservation and Education Committee of La Casa Cultural, who has been working closely with their own archive. And I would love to take the moment to share that our wonderful colleagues in manuscripts and archives as a part of our Beinecke umbrella house and steward the archives of groups on campus historically over the centuries, and any group on campus is able to enter their materials into the official university archive and become a part of the story of this institution over its many generations. And so La Casa Cultural has been working over the years with Mike Lotstein and Jean Lowry and our wonderful team of curators and archivists over at Manuscripts and Archives. And so I think, as a plug for anyone here who might be a part of an on-campus organization or connected to one, an alum, someone who's had a connection or a part of any engagement with those and would like to imagine how the archives and records of that organization could fit in to the official institutional history of Yale, there is a pathway to do that, and Mike Lotstein is the person to do that. So he would love to talk to anyone out there in the audience who would like to see their archives, much like La Casa's archives, as a part of what people can access to learn about histories of all kinds here in our community. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to our wonderful group of students who it's been a real pleasure to get to know and work with in this last year, my first year as curator, who've contributed so much of their time and energy to sharing their experience of the archive with such a broad range of people through our open house through this Mondays at Beinecke. So thank you in advance to you. But we have Hayley Serpa, Nina Feliciano-Batista, and Chris Lewis, who are going to speak a little bit about their experience of the La Casa archive here. So thank you very much, and over to you.
Okay, wait, sorry, my mute was not working, but hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. We are very excited to showcase some of the archives that our committee has been working with recently, and being able to share with the community is especially very important to us. So thank you so much. I guess some quick introductions. My name is Nina Feliciano-Batista. I'm a sophomore majoring in ethics, politics, and economics with a certificate in data science. I'm also a student coordinator at the Latino Cultural Center, lovingly known as La Casa Cultural, and I'm a member of the Historical Preservation and Education Committee, HPE. I'll pass it over to my colleagues if they want to introduce themselves real quick.
Thank you, Nina. Hi, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name's Hayley, she, her, ella. I am the graduate assistant of special projects at La Casa, and I'm also currently a PhD student in the History of Science and Medicine program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen. You can call me Chris. A lot of people at La Casa call me Chris. Pronouns she, her, ella. I'm a senior in Yale College, majoring in English and History of Social Change and Movements. And I'm the co-head peer liaison at La Casa this year. And I have previously been the chair or co-chair of Desperto Boricua, which I'll talk about later.
All right, so the HPE committee is a very recent endeavor that emerged from an archival project last year. So originally we were researching the presence and contributions of Latina activists in the 1970 May Day rally here in New Haven. And in doing so, we began digging into the extensive collection of archives available here at Yale, and we very quickly discovered that Latin students have been incredibly active throughout the years, both on campus and off campus. So, with the 50th anniversary of La Casa Cultural's founding on the horizon, we decided to expand this archival effort into the HPE committee with the hope to continue archiving, preserving, and educating people on the history of our community. So we've had a few events throughout the semester, many in collaboration with the Beinecke Library, which we are so incredibly grateful for their support. And now with this Mondays at Beinecke session, we thought it would just be an amazing opportunity to showcase some of our favorite items from the archives. So, Hayley, if you wouldn't mind switching the slide. Specifically, I thought it would be amazing to showcase some of my favorite items from the initial archival project on May Day that brought us here, as well as some other items that inspired us to pursue this project and collaborate within the HBE committee. So these first items are both pages from the April 23rd, 1970 edition of the Strike newspaper, which was a newspaper organized and written by Yale students on campus. So if you are interested in these materials, they are part of the May Day rally in Yale collection, which includes some really amazing items. So this specific edition of Strike was published in advance of the May Day rally that would take place about a week later. And as you can see on the page on the right, it features a section of the newspaper dedicated to programming within the residential colleges. And it also offers a lot of insight into how students were organizing within the Yale community at the time, but still engaging with New Haven politics and activism in really meaningful ways. So one of the details that really stood out to us is the list of residential college voting results and their scheduled meetings. In the majority of the colleges, there were two votes happening at the same time in April of 1970. The first was on the issue of organizing a university-wide strike in solidarity with the May Day rally, which in the case of Saybrook College, for example, the vote distinguished between a university-wide shutdown and a suspension of classes. So we firstly see students engaging in really meaningful conversations about the different forms of activism and the different forms that solidarity can take. And then the second vote was regarding whether to open the residential colleges to the public throughout the May 1st weekend. And just to summarize a bit of what the page says, out of the 13 colleges, 9 of them voted in favor of continuing and or participating in the strikes. 2 of them voted against, and as of the time of the strike publication, a week before the May 1st weekend, 2 residential colleges had yet to vote on the matter. And then on top of that, 6 of those colleges held voting on the second issue of whether or not to open the residential colleges to the public, and 5 of them voted in favor of opening up the colleges for the May 1st weekend. And some of those colleges included Davenport, Morse, Pearson, Saybrook, Trumbull, a lot of names that if you are a student or alumni, you definitely know. And some of the other colleges were expected to vote in the following week. So what this page shows is that there was definitely some contestation among students on the matter of the university-wide strike and what that would entail and look like, but there was an overwhelmingly positive push towards opening up the university spaces to the public for May Day. So then, last year, as we're researching the 1970 May Day rally, we come across these exact pages from the strike publication alongside a ton of other archives documenting the role of students in organizing May Day programming. And what was really interesting and especially resonating to us was that a lot of these students were similarly engaging in local activism throughout New Haven, and they were striving for these issues to not only be acknowledged but advocated for on campus among students and faculty. So the decision to open up the residential colleges to the public as part of this organizing really speaks to the consciousness and commitment of such student activists to creating an open space for conversation, for expression, and for an exchange of ideas. And the fact that it was student-led referendums within the colleges leading these efforts especially resonated with us. So these archives and the May Day rally at Yale collection really serve as a way to commemorate student-led efforts at a time when campus life and academic life was considered to be completely separate and thus isolated from the surrounding city dynamics. And as for the second page that you see to the left, from the 1970 strike newspaper, it features the front page of the April 21st, 1970 publication, which includes reporting on an existing strike steering committee, a policy statement from the strike newspaper that you can see in a box at the top right, and notably, it also includes a section on the proposed university-wide strike. Specifically, it talks about how a small group of faculty had drafted a proposal expressing, quote, full support for the shutting down and opening of Yale University. And it then goes on to describe some of the clauses included in the draft proposal, but more importantly, it reports that the draft proposal was introduced and discussed at a student faculty-led teach-in at Brantford College. And just to show once more we see these instances of student-led activism, and now with this specific section, student-faculty collaboration to exert pressure on the university for the sake of advocacy and reform. So, Hayley, if you could change to the next slide. Thank you so much. So to really finish off my section of the presentation and pass it off to my amazing colleagues who will talk so much more interesting stuff, I really just wanted to showcase some of the materials from the May Day weekend itself. These two are a hand-drawn map of the residential colleges and what services they offer to the public throughout the May 1st weekend, alongside an explanation of the symbols and what each service constituted. So we see residential colleges offering general information centers, medical centers, food provision, on-campus housing, rest areas with medical students present for needed support, bathrooms, and even a makeshift day care center at Davenport College for students, staff, and members of the extended New Haven community. Most of the residential colleges, as you can see in the map with the little symbols, provided housing, food, and rest stations, with only some of them, like Pearson and nearby Timothy Dwight, offering medical stations. But it nevertheless proves how much is possible through student organizing. This was the fruit of their labor throughout this week of talks and negotiations within the common rooms. So in the end, our hours of researching the role of student activists in the 1970s May Day rally led us to another collection in the Yale archives, the Latino Student Life at Yale records, which I'll definitely pass off to Hayley so that she can talk more about those records. But before I go, I wanted to take the time to really underscore that among the students that led these efforts throughout the May 1st weekend and more generally throughout the 1970s were Latino students at Yale. Among them, the Chicano and Puerto Rican students were particularly active and essential to student organizing at this time. So, although the names of these students may not be explicitly documented in these archives, it is impossible to omit their contributions and their efforts from our community's history. And it is especially important that when we are researching and archiving and revisiting history, we consider not only those who are named, but those who were not. So, thank you so much, and I'll pass it off to Hayley.
Thank you so much, Nina, for a fantastic introduction and for really discussing how we got involved in this research and really thinking about student activism at Yale broadly. So I will focus this part of the presentation on the history of Latinx student activism at Yale before 1977. So 1977 is the year that La Casa Cultural Julia de Burgos was officially established at 301 Crown Street. And I'm choosing to center this 1977 period because I think it reveals a lot of how La Casa's creation really came about through student organizing. And these students imagined and fought for a Yale that reflected their experiences, language, and communities. And I really hope that through highlighting this pre-1977 work, we can better understand how student activism can lead to institutional change. And these are some pictures from some of our events this past fall, which were really fantastic. And to explore this, I will be drawing from these two key archival collections. So Nina did a great job discussing some of the papers in the May Day Rally and Yale collection, and I will share some of the papers that we can see in the Latinx Student Life at Yale records. The Latinx Student Life at Yale records were originally donated in 2022 through a partnership between former La Casa Dean, Dr. Eileen M. Galvez, and Professor Ana Ramos Sayas' Latinx Ethnographies class. Ramos Sayas is a Yale alum and a La Casa graduate, and is currently a professor in Yale's program in Ethnicity, Race, and Migration. La Casa Cultural Julia de Burgos was officially established in 1977 as Yale's Puerto Rican Student Center at 301 Crown Street, in a 3-floor, 19th century red brick town home where it still stands today. It is the second oldest cultural center at Yale, after the Afro-American Cultural Center, founded in 1969. It is the largest Latinx cultural center in the Ivy League. You might recognize La Casa by the mural of Julia de Burgos on its right-hand side, a beautiful, vibrant image that includes one of the Puerto Rican poet's most famous verses. Do not remember me, feel me, for the less you remember me, the more you will love me. This mural was painted in 1994 by Rafael Will, a Venezuelan graduate of the Yale School of Art, alongside students from the ACES Educational Center for Arts, a public arts high school in the Audubon district of New Haven. Completed in July of 1994, it's an image that has come to symbolize the pride and creative energy of Yale's Latinx community. And it constantly reminds us that history isn't just remembered, but also felt. However, before there was a building, before there was a mural, there were students who had to organize to make themselves visible within an institution that had historically excluded them. The 1960s and 1970s were transformative decades for student activism around the world, and Yale was no exception. The passing of affirmative action in 1961, the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and the admission of women into Yale in 1969 reshaped the university's campus. For the first time, small numbers of Latin students began to arrive on campus in the mid-1960s, raising urgent questions about representation, inclusion, and belonging. They entered Yale during a moment of profound political ferment, when students were mobilizing around the Vietnam War, standing in solidarity with Black liberation movements, and joining local protests alongside the New Haven chapter of the Black Panther Party. The 1969 New Haven Black Panther trials, centered on the arrest and eventual freeing of Bobby Seale, were a central moment that exposed deep tensions between the university, the city, and broader struggles for racial justice. Out of this period of upheaval and transformation emerged new forms of student organizing, ones that sought not only to participate in the university, but to reshape it from within. In 1968, the first Latinx affinity group at Yale, MECHA, the Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, was founded to represent Chicano and Mexican American students. A few years later, in 1971, Despierta Boricua, or DB, as we will hear more in depth from Chris, DB's historian, was officially recognized as a student organization representing Puerto Rican Yale students from both the island and the diaspora. While MECHA and DB organized separately through the late 1960s and 1970s, they both shared a common purpose: to make Yale accountable to the Latinx communities it had long excluded. By the mid-1970s, that vision began to take shape with the creation of La Casa Boricua in 1974, and a few years later, during the 1980s, a Chicano Center was established next door, where the Asian American Cultural Center is currently housed. It would not be until 1999 that these separate communities formally unified under La Casa Cultural Julia de Burgos, bringing together decades of Puerto Rican, Chicano, and Latinx student organizing under one roof. Both of these groups, MECHA and DB, were central early advocates for the creation of La Casa and reimagining Yale as a space that could one day belong to students of color too. And part of this work meant building coalitions and standing in solidarity with other students on campus, as well as students and workers in the broader New Haven community. As Nina outlined earlier, one of the most powerful examples of Latinx student activism and solidarity in this period came during the 1970 May Day rally on the Green. Thousands of people gathered on the Green to demand justice for the New Haven Black Panthers, as well as contend with some of the other larger national questions around higher education. Through carefully reading some of the strike newspaper sections, one can see that Latinx students were deeply involved in supporting these actions. One example is students from Yale's Spanish department who organized teach-ins and, quote, announced their intention to work with the Hispanic community to demonstrate the analogies between conditions there and in the Black community, end quote. Another group, El Comité por un Puerto Rico Libre, an early predecessor of DB, expressed complete solidarity with the United Front for the Defense of the Black Panthers, sharing their own efforts working alongside the New Haven Puerto Rican community and the Young Lords. The same week, on May 8, 1970, the Yale Rep Theater hosted performances of Don Juan, with all the money being donated to the Calvin Hill Daycare Center. This daycare is a site where many Yale Latinx students, particularly Latino organizers, volunteered their time. This connection with Calvin Hill gives us a glimpse into a different side of activism, one that's not just about protest, but also about education, care, health, and everyday relationship and community building. Through actions like these, Latinx students at Yale helped define what student activism looked like. And for them, it meant to be grounded in solidarity, informed by each other's work, and connected to broader movements for racial and social justice. These organizing efforts weren't just symbolic. Students were really pushing for concrete institutional changes, in particular, the creation of a dedicated space for cultural, political, and intellectual expression. Without the sustained student organizing from groups like Mecha, DB, and other independent organizers, there would be no La Casa as we know it today. Their struggles reframed the university itself as a place where justice was not abstract, but rather could be built through the creation of spaces for those long excluded from them. All of these histories would come together in the founding of La Casa Cultural in 1977, and later the completion of the Julia de Burgos mural in 1994. The mural's message, again, do not remember me, feel me, captures the living nature of this history. It's really not about nostalgia or distant commemoration. It's about presence, emotion, and continuity. In fact, La Casa has not stopped making murals. Just last year, La Casa commissioned the ones you see here, portraits of Latinx women whose stories continue to expand what the meaning of our space is. In this presentation, I've tried to sort of weave together the story of La Casa's founding, pre-1979, as well as our murals with through honoring the students who fought for and built these spaces where we continue to gather. And their organizing, I hope, can remind us of how important it is to know that our work is a part of this longer story and to not separate it from theirs. So thank you so much. And I will go ahead and pass it on to Chris to talk a little bit more about DB.
Okay, hello everyone. Buenas tardes, todos. All right, my name is Kristen again, or Chris, as a lot of people know me as, pronounced she, her, ella, senior Yale College, major in English and history. To start off, I just want to say thank you so much to Hayley and Nina for providing the historical context. That will be so helpful for building up the background for Distrito Boricua and everything I'll be talking about. So I'll be talking a little bit more about the specific instances of organizing DB in order to get Casa Boricua, or the early iterations of La Casa Cultural. And I'll also be tying it back to the present day, as you can see from this image on the screen. All right, so Distrito Boricua, which is the Puerto Rican Students Organization at Yale. If you're unfamiliar with DB, picture weekly coffee chats or cafecitos while folks play dominos, catch up on our week in our room on the second floor of La Casa, which you could see is the same room here in both pictures. Shout out history over time. Or picture listening parties for this underground artist you might have heard of called Bad Bunny, visits to New Haven public high schools to support Boricua students looking to apply to Yale, salsa workshops, talks on coalition building with other identity-based organizations, so much more. We could go to the next slide, Haley. In fact, our activities and goals that we conduct today and within recent years, especially last year as I was a co-chair, this year as I pass along to members of our current board like Nina, our goals and activities have really not changed much since our original days. So I'll just leave this up here so we can all see and remember how our goals as a community organization, but also as an extension of La Casa Cultural, Casa Boricua, the early iterations of La Casa, were to build community throughout the city of New Haven, and within the university with fun, food, but also serious academic and emotional discussion. And again, most importantly, community. So even though I moved on from my co-chair duties when I was leaving the role, I told the current incredible board that, especially since I'm academically obsessed with the archives, I would informally task myself with being DB's historian and archivist. And so that's why I am here today. So Después de Boricua, DB directly translates to wake up Puerto Rican. So our organization adopted this phrase, Después de Boricua, from the political chant that could have been utilized as early as the mid-19th century. And we know this because archival documents in the 1970s documenting protests in New York City, for example, have referenced chants such as Despierta Boricua, defiende lo tuyo. So defend what's yours, wake up, Puerto Rican. And across the years, the phrase has served as a call to arms in the struggle for justice. It's been used to call for everything from waking up to protesting against violence and police brutality against Boricuas, waking up to join the fight for independence from Spanish and American colonization, especially during the 1868 uprising in Laides, Puerto Rico. All this. These are all the historical context that Después de Boricua adopts its phrase from. And so in 1971, Boricua students found themselves wanting to advocate for more recruitment of prospective students and support for current Boricua students on campus. And just to put their names out there, because I really, really value naming folks in our archives, our founders included folks like Eduardo Pablo, Manuel de Valle, Cruz Ramos, Gilberto Casella, and Hector Medina. So many thanks to Amanda Rivera, who I think she's on the webinar, but she is a grad student who's really helped DB with finding these names and securing them in our archives. So these are mainly New York-based Boricua men. I'm really curious about discovering more about the women and gender minoritized leaders of DB moving forward. But regardless, these founders took the phrase Despierta Boricua as the name of our organization because it was motivation, fuel, and ultimately a reminder that they desired to not only build community amidst one another, but that they wanted to fight for a better future for Boricua students moving forward. And that brings me to my next slide. Okay. So luckily for me, DB's founders took extensive notes and kept nearly everything, so much so that we have the notes documenting their first meetings between DB's original leaders and Yale University admin, during which the students advocated for one of the most legacy gifting things they could have done, to fight for that better future for Boricua students coming after them, a cultural center. Okay, so here we have the meeting notes from a 1973 meeting where we have the Yale University president, Kingman Brewster, and Boricua students documenting how they switched their strategies during this meeting with President Brewster in real time. Like these notes document exactly when they switched their priorities or what their main arguments were in talking with them in order to convince admin that a culture center was absolutely necessary. So they shifted from speaking about the growing number of Boricua students on campus to instead leaning on Brewster's insistence that the Yale University would only be able and willing to shift funds for academic purposes. So when students heard about this, they started to say that their proposed Casa Boricua could instead be considered a house for PR studies. Which, yes, we are pro-academia here. And it could also be deemed a groundbreaking space for the university to conduct more academic research regarding the island. So as a scholar of social movements, this points out to me that Boricua Yalis were serious negotiators with the university, and they were no stranger to the bureaucracy of the institution. They highlighted financial reasons, they highlighted social reasons, academic reasons. They told Yale that they had everything to benefit from La Casa, or the early iteration of it. And then they followed up this original meeting with, you can go to the next slide. They followed up this original meeting in the past slide with a paper trail of memos and letters with exact dates that previous meetings happened, exact promises that were broken, and reasons why the university would benefit from a center, and why failing to provide one would look bad for the university, which supposedly dedicated itself to the thriving of students and future leaders. So these reasons, as I mentioned, were social, emotional, academic, financial, you name it, and they had already made it a reason. And they sent these memos and letters not only amongst one another in order to archive and document these meetings, but to President Brewster to the rest of admin, and to other identity-based organizations on Yale. So highlighting again coalition building, and also making sure that their wishes and desires were documented in their own words. So again, this tells us that Latina Yalees have always been strategic and intentional advocates for a better future for those who come after them. It's always been intentional, it's always been strategic, and we've always been organizing. So we can go to the last slide, I think. Okay, so thanks to them, centers like our beautiful La Casa continue to exist. This is a space where activities and aspects like those listed in this prose list of having a center that was originally sent to President Brewster in the early 1970s are still able to and regularly do happen today. We are able to have library talks like this one, film screenings, conferences, workshops, social events, volunteer opportunities, all from our lovely, lovely casita. And these were the goals of the original founders or proposals of La Casa or Casa Boricua or Cultural Center at all. So shout out to our early advocates for La Casa, and shout out to the secretaries and historians of early DB for helping to make sure that the narrative of our fight for a cultural center is never forgotten. I'm really excited to continue to interrogate all of these archives and work with the HBNE committee to make sure that we continue to make this memory of La Casa and its early advocates a regular key part of our oral history and regular written narrative history for years to come. But thank you, everyone.